Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. Today I'm going to be adding FPV to the 450 size quadcopter that I built in my previous video. So we are starting on my desktop, so that can only mean one thing. We're going to do some shopping. Now again, I'm going to use 3 websites here. So I'm going to do the same as before. We're going to search for all the components, add it up and see how much it costs. Now this one isn't going to be so much of a budget build. It's going to be cheap, but I want to make sure that we're getting decent parts as well. So without further ado, let's go for the 2 important things, which are the video transmitter and the camera. So let's start on Banggood with the video transmitter. I'm going to type in 200 milliwatts. And then let's do transmitter. Okay, so it brings up a few options these days, but the first one that I went for was this one here. It's only £11. So I'm going to go into then, add it to my cart. Make sure that it adds to the cart. And then next we're going to go for the camera. Now Banggood does do its own cameras. In fact, it does its own FPV combination. But I've done a little bit of research on this, and I think it is better to spend a little bit extra money and get a slightly better camera. So you can see here, like, really cheap, £15 for the transmitter and the camera. You can go for that if you like, but I'm not going to. Instead, we're going to get the camera from Surveil Zone. Now, the way that I find this camera is I type in, it's there, 600 TVL FPV. Now, pretty much everybody in the hobby community is using this camera, so I'm going to as well. And it comes in various different forms. I'm going to go for this one that's got its own case so that you can change the angle and we don't have to mess around with mounting it or anything like that. So let's go on here. In fact, I want to change the currency to GBP. And let's go on there. It's £24, or I think this one's got a slightly wider angle lens, so I'm going to go for that one. And let's add this to the cart. Okay, £24. So those are really your sort of 2 main things that you need really to get going. After that, it really depends on your requirements and how you like to view FPV. Really, if you want to go uber cheap, then I would suggest that you got a receiver and maybe a cheap monitor off eBay. So we can just do the same, I think, by searching 200 milliwatts like that. And then here you see, this is the VTX that we have bought, and here is the receiver that you can get, and again, it's only £11. And what you do is you power this off a 3-cell battery or a DC 12-volt adapter, and then you plug this into like a monitor or something like that. I'm not going to go for the cheaper option. I'm going to go for the monitor option, but we'll get to that in a bit. So let's just see how much this is going to cost just for those 2 little parts. £11 and 3 pence plus £24.79. So £35 to get you going. It's not bad, but we are going to need some more stuff. So let's get rid of that a minute. So we're now going to go on to eBay, because with this quadcopter, it was designed for a 3-cell or a 4-cell, and I'm mostly going to be using 4 cells with this. And so this VTX here requires like 3-cell power. I think it's 2-cell to 4-cell, and the same with this. If you have a look, I think it accepts anywhere between 7 volts and 22 volts, I think, if you look in the specs. Anyways, right. So we installed a power distribution board on the quadcopter, and if you're sort of seeing this video for the first time, go back and watch how I built the quadcopter. What I'm going to add is a BEC so that we get clean video. We don't get any interference off the motors, and we don't get any voltage drops as well. So when you're flying your quadcopter around and you punch the throttle, it reduces the voltage of the battery, and you don't get a consistent voltage output. So we're going to add a UBEC. And then if we type in FPV at the end of it as well, it should give us these ones. Now, I could get one of these dearer ones here, but as with everything, China sells the cheapest, so I'm going to get one of these. And it's got a JST connector on the end of it as well, so let's add that to the basket. So, as we are connecting it to a JST connector, we are going to need some JST connectors to solder to our power distribution board. Now, I've done this so that we have the minimum amount of soldering. We're only going to need to solder one thing in this. All the wires are going to come with the camera and the VTX. So the only thing we're going to need to solder is the JST connector. So I'm going to search for JST lead. Okay, and I'm sure somewhere in China we'll have them dirt cheap. I'm hoping. There we go. Look at that. 10 sets for £1. Good old China. Add these to the basket. We're only going to need one side, but I'm buying them in bulk because I go through these a lot with my builds and things like that. So, we've got the JST connector. We've got the FPV UBEC so that we get a nice clean video and we get a nice voltage as well, because if the voltage starts to drop on the VTX, then the power of the VTX starts to drop and you could lose some range. So we want to ensure that we're always getting the same voltage into the camera. Even if the camera has got its own onboard regulator, it's good to have one of these, I think. So we're going to do that. So we've got the VTX, we have got the camera, and we've got the leads that we need. So the next thing that you're going to want is a upgraded antenna, because this one is just using a dipole, and we're going to want to use a cloverleaf antenna. So the way that we find one of those is we need to search for RP SMA, because that stands for reverse polarization SMA, and basically it's to do with the way that these connect here. These two connectors have a spike, like a male and a female side, and the polarity of the SMA depends on which side the spike is in. And this one requires an RP SMA, so we're going to search for RP SMA cloverleaf, I think it was. Or did I search for FPV? Let's search for FPV first. Yeah, there we go. Look. So, let's add it to the basket. So this, then, in my opinion, is all the stuff that you are going to need in order to get, like, a full setup. And that doesn't include your video receiver or whatever. So let's just clear that and let's just add this up. So all that comes to £8.86 plus £24.79 plus £11.03. £44.68, so we're not breaking the bank yet, but it is getting quite expensive, considering that we had to spend, is it £120 to £160 on the quadcopter? We're talking like £200 now, and we don't even have our video receiver yet. So one thing I want to do next is I kind of want to future-proof this quadcopter, because I plan adding a gimbal and an autopilot controller. So you don't need to do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for FPV landing. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a landing skid. So the reason why I am doing this is I want to extend the front of the quadcopter, because on the Alien X frame you get the props in shot here. Now, first of all, I don't plan on adding these legs, but I plan on adding these tubes here. if we look at a picture of it, what you can do is you've got these rubber grommets here, and they connect to these platforms, and you can cable tie these platforms to the bottom of your quadcopter, and that's going to allow us to have these poles extend out at the front so that we can add our FPV camera, but also add a gimbal underneath eventually and connect these legs. We're not going to connect the legs in this video, but I am going to buy this, so that's up to you. It's optional, this bit. I'm going to add that to the cart. 1 item's added to the cart. So let's talk next about the receiver. Now, I did talk about this slightly before. If you search for 200 milliwatts, then you can buy a very cheap 5.8 receiver. I do need to state this is a 5.8 FPV system, okay? There are other frequencies as well, but that's what we're using for this so that it doesn't interfere from the 2.4 system and things like that. Eventually I will be adding UHF to the quadcopter, maybe a longer range video system, but for now this is what we're adding. I'm also going to add like an OSD and things like that. So anyways, yeah, so the receiver, this is totally up to your requirements. Now, my requirements for flying a big quadcopter like this is I don't want to be wearing goggles. I think it's dangerous. If you lose sight of the quadcopter and you have a problem, it's just going to fall out of the sky. It could hit someone. What I think is a better option is to use a monitor so that you can sort of FPV from the monitor, but if you look up, you can see the quadcopter and not let it get too far away from you for safety reasons. So your two options are make a ground station, a cheapo ground station where you just sort of have a tripod and connect this to it. But I think the easier option is spend a little bit more and go for an FPV monitor. So that's what I'm going to do on this. We're going to go FPV monitor. And you've got quite a few options here. So I have some specific requirements because I'm picky, okay? So I want my monitor to have diversity, so I can put 2 different antennas on here and it can get the strongest signal. So you could, say, have a helical antenna here and a cloverleaf antenna here. The helical will be for when you get further away, and this one will be for close-in work. And there are a few different options. I think if I were to buy one now, I would go for this Feel World one. It's a little bit more expensive. It's £148, but it does everything that I want. So the one that I have is the Sky Zone 700D. I'm going to have to search for it. Sky Zone 700D. And it's a little bit cheaper, but it does almost hit all of the points, right? There's just a couple of things that I have issues with this with. I did make a video of this monitor. It was on my Flying 3D X6 where I added FPV to that. And it pretty much does do everything. I just had a couple of problems with it. And that was that the frequency is done on dip switches, whereas the Feel World one is done internally. It automatically searches for the strongest signal, or you could manually select it. So that was sort of like a negative point with it. The other problem that I had with this monitor was that when it lost signal, and when I mean lose signal, you sort of got the snowflake effect. You did get the sort of the static screen, but it has a big no signal sign in here, and when your screen's flickering, it can get quite annoying that it keeps flashing on and off. So that was another thing that annoyed me about it. And as well, the battery that they sell specifically for this had the wrong connector. So that was just a couple of things that I didn't like about this, but it is lightweight and it does have its own battery compartment there. You can put a 2S in there and it's got an on and off button. So it is pretty good, and it comes with this this shield here from the sun, and it's so bright, you know. So it is an all-in-one system. So I do like it, that fact about it. You can see here, that's the battery that they sell, but when I bought it, I complained, and they gave me a little refund because it had the wrong connector on it. Apparently, they said they had ordered the wrong connector, or they'd sent to Bangor the wrong connector. So you could probably buy that now and not have a problem, but that's an issue that I had with it. So to connect this to your transmitter, you're going to need a stand. So I think I searched for FPV mount, and Banggood do these sort of universal, here you go, FPV mounts there. They see display stand, which was the one that I went for. See, there's a few. It wasn't the Tarot one. It was this one here. And look how cheap that is. It's so cheap. Okay, so you can choose the gold color if you want, or if you're feeling, you know, a little bit feminine, you can go for the pink one. I don't mind a little bit of pink color in my life, so let's go for the orange one. Gold one, whatever you want to call it. Let's add that to the cart. One item added to cart. You can see here that the stand connects to your neck holder. You know, if you have one of those connectors there that you put around your neck, so the weight of the TX is sort of taken by your neck, and then you can actually plug that into there if you're still using those, so it doesn't get rid of that. You know, and then you stick the monitor on here, and it uses like a tripod screw to screw into there. So I think it's going to be quite expensive now, but this is my setup. This is what I'm going for. If you want to go for something else, then that's fine. I think where the main expense is on the video receiver side. Like I say, you can have a very cheap setup if you want to do it very manually, but this is an all-in-one system. And of course, if you want to go the goggles route as well, but goggles are really expensive. They're more expensive than this £100 monitor, you know, nearly £300 for the Fat Sharks. So that's completely up to you. Okay, so let's add all this up now and see what the total price is. I don't look. £130.56 plus £24.79 plus the £8.86. £164. It's more expensive than our quadcopter, but like I say, that includes everything that I'm using. So let's close our eyes and press buy it now. Now I am going to use a couple of other items for this build. They are optional, but I would really recommend that you get them. So the first one, if we go onto Google and search for Hobby King anti-vibration and scroll down, I'm using this one. You can use other ones, of course. Now, I don't endorse Hobby King, and that is probably a bad thing for my channel, but I have had so many problems with them. So Hobby King, if you're out there and watching, please come and prove me wrong, because I have had some items that simply haven't turned up. Small items like this I don't mind buying off you, but larger items, I've had to raise too many cases. So anyways, yeah, if you want to go and buy this one, click in there, but I'm not going on your website, okay? So, Hobby King anti-vibration. So the next thing I'm going to use is aluminum or aluminium tape. And that is because these ESCs, the quite cheap ESCs, give out quite a lot of RF noise, and that means that it's going to interfere with the video. So you can buy copper as well, but I find this is more readily available and it's quite cheap, so I'm going to go for that as well. And we'll be wrapping the ESCs in this, making sure that nothing's shorting out, of course, and also the VTX as well, so that we get crystal clear video. And then the last thing is a helical or helical antenna. This is Stone Blue Airlines. It's the website that IB Crazy is affiliated with, who deals with all the FPV antennas. To find the one I'm using, we go to FPV gear, antennas, right hand polarized, 5.8, and then helical and 5-turn. Quite a few menus there, but this is the one that I'm using. Now, these can get quite expensive, but the one that I chose was this old stock, and it seems to be $9.99. Now, you can get one here that is for Fat Shark, so it's got this 90-degree bend in there, but I want one that's completely straight so that it can screw into the top of my monitor. Now, this one, though, isn't semi-rigid, so what I'm going to have to do is glue it to the back of here so that this just sticks out the bottom so it doesn't sort of flop about, but this is going to attach to the diversity receiver on the Sky Zone monitor. So those are all the other things that I'm using. So this stuff has turned up, so let's take a look at what we've got. First of all, the video transmitter. I'm just going to open it. This is what you get here. Get a bunch of wires and the stock antenna. We want to just take the stock antenna. I'm going to connect it. You can use the cloverleaf one that I showed you in the video as well, but for the purpose of this, I'm just going to use the stock antenna for now. Then you get these two wires here, you see, that plug into it. This one here has no connectors on the end of it. We're not going to need this wire, even though it does fit quite nicely in there. We're going to need this wire, however. This is the power connector, you see, the JST. And then we have the back, and that is going to plug into the power here. So that's how we're going to get our power into it. And then you could either chop this off, and this is going to get soldered to the power distribution board of the quadcopter, or what you can do is get one of the JST cables that we bought, snip it off quite short, connect that to the power distribution board, then you don't need to cut away your U-back. Let's go back to this other wire. You get this, but when we get the camera, it comes in this box like this. Get it open. Some instructions. This is the camera. Now it doesn't come on its stand, you just have to screw it in there. And that is the orientation for up there. And so you get a couple of wires with this. This is the important one, but you also get this wire here, and this plugs into the camera, and it's got a really weird connector. And what I did was I chopped this connector off here and added just a normal composite connector, because this is your control. You can change the camera settings, but I found out of the box the settings are great already. I haven't needed to change anything, so for the purpose of this video I'm not changing anything, but if you want to, you connect this up here. I wouldn't recommend connecting this to the quad because it's quite heavy. So one thing that I noticed with all this setup is this wire here. This connects into the back of the camera, and it's got a servo lead connected to it. And I noticed here that this connector here, it's in the same order. If we turn them around, you've got ground, positive, and video. We don't need the other two because this camera doesn't have a microphone on it. So we've got ground, positive, and video. So what we can do is do away with that connector and just plug this one into the last 3 pins. Now you have to be careful, of course, that you've got them the right way. This connector won't allow you to put it in the wrong way because it's got this clip here, but that's in quite sturdy, that. So if you're not going to be changing it a lot, just keep it there, and you might want to mark on which way that it goes. But yeah, anyway, so then this just goes into the back of the camera. And there we go, that's our full setup. The only thing that I am left to do is connect the JST connector. It actually comes with a JST connector there, so we didn't need to really buy those other JST connectors, but it's always good to have them. This can get soldered directly to our power distribution board, and then we can connect this to the quadcopter, and we can do some FPVing. So the good thing about the way that I've got this set up, it means that I can access this corner here of the power distribution board, and we can just add the connector without taking it all apart. So I'm just going to tin these contacts now. Be careful that I don't burn any part of the quadcopter or affect the current soldering joints. So that's the positive and the minus, just tinned there. Get a bit more on. Careful that the two don't join, they're quite close together. And then I'm going to take the red wire and attach it to the plus. There we go. Got a nice join there. And the black wire. there we go. We got a nice join. Before we move on, I'm going to show you how I have extended the front so that the props aren't going to be in view. Now, as I showed you before, this is the landing gear and the skids connect underneath there, but I've just used it for the moment to extend the front. So if we turn this over, you can see there that the landing gear is made up of these poles here, and they connect to these sliding rubber grommets here, and you've got certain plates here, and all I've done, you can screw the plates direct if you like, but what I tend to find works is you can cable tie them, and then in a crash this doesn't snap, it just breaks the cable tie points and your quadcopter is fine. So that's what I've done there. We've got various cable ties to ensure that this thing doesn't move at all and we don't get vibration from it. In fact, because these are dampeners, these little rubber grommets here actually reduces the vibration, so it's kind of a 2-in-1. In fact, it's advertised as that. It's advertised as an FPV landing gear, really, and you connect your gear to this, and you use one of these as a battery holder as well, but seeing as we already have this at the back to hold the battery, I didn't need that, and later we can connect the legs and connect a gimbal and things like that, but for now we can just add our FPV camera. Okay, so I have got everything connected and I just wanted to show you how I have done that. So we've got the camera on the vibration dampener at the front. It is hot glued in, and the reason for that is that these propellers push down on the camera and it points it down no matter how tight I had these, so I had to hot glue it in. I've also hot glued in the bottom and cable tied it as well. I was too lazy to put a screw in because I wasn't sure how permanent this was going to be. So then you will also notice that I have got some aluminium tape wrapped around the ESCs, and that is because I was getting interference. I have also soldered directly the cables to the ESCs because I was also getting a bit of RF noise from these connectors, believe it or not. They must generate some kind of resistance, and I always wondered why people didn't use these bullet connectors, but that must be why. And also we have got the VTX here, which it's got a plastic coating on the outside, so I have wrapped some aluminium tape as well around that, and we get no interference now. And the last thing, we have got the voltage regulator there, which is plugged into the power distribution board and then plugged into the power cable of the VTX, and then the VTX powers the camera. This is how I've got the transmitter. You can see here that bracket that I bought. I did have to widen the bottom there so that I could get the screw through here, and I had to get a longer screw as well. And then you can see here it just connected to the monitor underneath, and then for diversity we've got the cloverleaf antenna and also that helical or helical antenna there, and just so that it doesn't move around I have hot glued it in here so that it stands up, and then you can point this at the quadcopter. So that's it pretty much. Let's go see what it looks like from the DVR footage. So what I have done is I have taken different DVR clips from the SkyZone monitor on different days and done a few flights to show the wide dynamic range of this camera, and I believe that is why people go for this camera, because even on this gloomy day here that was really difficult lighting, the camera picks up the ground really nice, but it also picks up the sky really nice as well. It's not particularly good quality in comparison to other FPV cameras, but you don't need the quality to be good to do FPV. You just need to be able to see stuff, and as we point the camera to the sky there, you can see we've got the clouds, but also the ground in shot as well. Now, this is the really wide angle version, and I don't know whether it's too wide. You can see we're getting quite a lot of distortion there on the side of the lens, and it seems a little bit blurry as well, but I think that is just an artifact of these standard definition FPV cameras. When I compare it to my 1-gram camera, which incidentally is the same price as this camera but obviously a lot smaller and a lot lighter, the quality is about the same. There's less sort of distortion because this is just seriously wide. You can see me there just doing a long pass. One thing that I'm still getting used to is the sheer speed of this thing when FPVing. It goes really fast and gets really close to you quickly, and it's caught me out a couple of times. I have made a turn and here get very close to the trees there because the inertia of the larger quadcopter there carrying me further than I intended. And also, as I'm in forward flight there, just covering a huge amount of ground with very little input. Look at that, just perfect view of the clouds and the ground. Very rare you can get that from an FPV camera. Now you can see here, as I get a little bit of height on, we've got some buffeting, and it's not perfect. Even with the vibration dampener, I'm still getting some slight vibrations. I think it's a combination of the vibrations from the motor and also the flight controller, but it looks really smooth from the ground, so it's probably more the cheap motors. I mean, the motors were like £6 each, and when I spin the motors with my hand, I can feel the vibrations going down to the arms, and I think it's down to the balance of the motor, but also the bearings that are in the motor as well. I'm considering adding some oil to the motors to smooth them out a bit, to get less vibrations, but I'm not sure that's the issue, to be honest. This quadcopter for the next few videos is going to get some serious upgrades. We're going to replace the motors, we're going to replace the ESCs, I mean, maybe even the frame, because I don't think the frame needs to have so much sort of space on it. So I chose this frame because I like the sort of TBS Discovery style, but if we're going to be adding a gimbal on it and we're using those poles from the landing gear to get the camera out front here, and you can see that has worked. We've not got any props in shot there. We don't really need the extra space, and I think that is taking up extra weight, and that is something else that I noticed as well, is that the flight times are shorter. I don't think the flight times are shorter because of the extra weight. I think they're shorter because of the extra draw on the battery. You have to remember the camera's running at 12 volts and also the VTX is running at 12 volts. So yeah, this definitely needs some weight taken off it here. But this is actually a second flight that I have done here. You can't tell because it's still quite a gloomy day, but you can see there we got some blue in the sky. It's definitely a different day, and this is what this camera really excels at here. On one of these days it was just so sunny, even though you can't see it because the camera balances it out nice. I could barely see the screen, even though it's such a bright FPV screen. When this thing's pointed directly into the sun, or no matter which way it's pointing, you get a fantastic... there is pointed directly into the sun. You can see we got a slight glare off the sun, but no distortion in the image at all, and I think that is why most people like this camera. It's not for the clarity, because it's to me, I don't think it is very clear, but all you need in a good FPV system is to be able to see around you, and you can certainly see that with this camera. We've got a perfect view of the sky, and if you look at the trees there, you can see that we're getting a slight double image, and again, I think that is down to the that's down to the vibrations there on the motors. But look at that, just you don't get that with a HD camera, that sort of ground in view, but also the sky in view. Now I was going to attach the Xiaomi Yi camera onto this as we get some height on there, and I'm actually flying line of sight here, but I kind of thought I'll just show the FPV footage, because the point that this quadcopter's at the moment, it's going to have some significant changes before I add a HD camera on here. And you can see the video's breaking up there, and that is because the antenna is pointing upwards and the quadcopter's right over my head, and so the 5.8 frequency isn't great for penetrating through objects, even the quadcopter itself, so that is why we're getting some interference there. Still flyable, I think, but I'm currently flying this line of sight at the moment. I've seen some people come up with solutions for this problem. They actually stick a servo on the antenna, and when it gets above them there, they flick a switch on the transmitter, and it orientates the antenna to point downwards, but really if you're trying to combat that, I would say put some legs on it and have the antenna pointed down always. But yeah, I'm really impressed how this this camera performs actually. It's not bad at all for the price. As I do some more fast flying there, and it doesn't do it justice how fast it's flying. I actually crashed here, and yeah, it was quite a thud. I think I chased a bird here as well. But one thing that I was surprised about is this VTX has an onboard microphone. I was flying around for a while, and when I got the footage back, I thought, where's the sound coming from? The camera doesn't have a microphone on it, but actually it's the VTX that has a built-in microphone. It's quite unusual, isn't it? But anyways, that is the FPV footage. I hope you liked the video. I think that's going to be pretty much it for this setup of this particular quadcopter. I think it's going to look very different than in the next video. But until then, thanks ever so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe, and as I do a perfect landing, cheers.